I want you to picture, just for a second, the sheer absurdity of this scenario. You're trying to hold a really heavy, maybe blood-stained broadsword in one hand.
Okay.
And at the exact same time, in your other hand, you are trying to carefully balance a delicate, burning bowl of incense.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's not going to end well.
Right. I mean, if you swing the sword, you're going to spill the incense everywhere.
Exactly.
But then if you just focus on keeping the incense perfectly still and reverent, you're entirely defenseless to actually use the sword.
You're completely wide open.
Yeah. It is this massive, just functional paradox.
Yeah.
But the thing is, when we look at the functional identity of a modern spiritual disciple, that is the exact dual posture that you are commanded to hold.
Yeah, it's wild when you really think about it.
You are told to be both fiercely battling the darkness, enforcing authority, and simultaneously completely surrendered in this quiet, weeping intimacy.
And it's a tension that, honestly, almost everyone gets wrong. I mean, you see people defaulting heavily to one side or the other all the time.
Oh, absolutely.
They either turn into these aggressive, hyper-militant warriors who are constantly picking fights.
Always angry about something.
Always angry, and they just blur out. Or, they retreat completely into the sanctuary. They become these beautiful, contemplative peacemakers.
But they don't actually do anything.
Right. They have absolutely zero tangible impact on the darkness that's literally right outside their front door.
Which is exactly why we are pulling apart René Engelbrecht's Kings and Priests,
Yeah.
the dual calling of the disciple today. We're doing a deep dive into this seemingly impossible mandate.
And it is a fascinating text.
It really is. The mission here for our deep dive is to figure out how these two aggressively opposite roles, so the warring king and the worshiping priest, are not just compatible, but are supposed to be seamlessly operating inside you at the exact same time.
Yeah, and the core text he anchors this whole premise on is Revelation 1.6.
Okay, let's unpack this. Revelation 1.6.
Right. It's the declaration that believers have been made kings and priests. And what I love about Engelbrecht's approach is that he treats this not as like a nice poetic metaphor for a Sunday morning, but as a rigid, functional job description.
A job description. I love that.
Yeah.
So to understand the mechanics of how this actually works, we need to look at the raw definitions of these two dimensions. Right?
Exactly. So let's look at the king first. The king operates in the outward dimension.
Okay.
Kingship is administrative. It's about dominion, governance, establishing the rule of law, and, spiritual warfare.
Taking territory.
Right. A king subdues opposition and takes territory. It's an active outward posture of enforcing order.
And then on the flip side, you have the priest.
Right. The priest operates in the inward and upward dimension. This is all about intimacy, worship, inward consecration, reconciliation.
It's a completely different energy.
Totally. The priest stands in the presence of the divine, interceding on behalf of the people. So it's a posture of absolute reverence.
So it's authority on one hand, intimacy on the other.
Yeah.
But, to figure out why God engineered this dual requirement for the disciple, we have to look back at why these roles were violently separated in the first place.
Yeah, you really can't understand the union without understanding the historical fracture.
Because the original blueprint didn't have this separation, right?
No, not at all. When you look at the Genesis mandate, the functional design for humanity back in Eden was a perfect fusion of the two.
They had both?
Exactly. Humanity was given the kingship mandate, dominion over the earth, the authority to govern, subdue, and cultivate it.
The outward stuff.
Right. But that outward authority was perfectly anchored in inward priestly intimacy. They walked in unbroken fellowship with the Creator.
Literally walking in the cool of the day.
Yes. So the authority to rule the garden was fueled entirely by the intimacy of that relationship.
But then the fall happens, and it shatters that. And the text makes a really brilliant point here that I want to highlight. The author points out that the fall didn't just strip humanity of its authority, it fundamentally severed the intimacy.
And that is the crucial piece. Because once that intimacy was gone, those two roles became incredibly toxic if held by the same person.
Wow, yeah. Toxic.
That's the crux of the Old Testament dynamic. Because of the sheer vulnerability of the human heart post-Eden, the text argues it became incredibly dangerous for any one person to wield both ultimate civil authority and ultimate spiritual access.
Because it corrupts.
Exactly. Power without intimacy metastasizes into corruption and tyranny. And on the flip side, intimacy without authority devolves into passivity and irrelevance.
So they had to be split.
Right. God structurally separated them in ancient Israel. You had the monarchy, so guys like David, Solomon, Hezekiah.
Kings.
Right. They handled governance, the military, the physical well-being of the state. And then strictly segregated from that, you had the Levitical priesthood.
Handling the sacrifice.
Sacrifices, the sanctuary, the spiritual well-being of the nation.
And the separation was enforced with like a lethal strictness.
Oh, absolutely lethal.
I always think about the story of Saul here.
Oh, perfect example.
All right. He's the king. He has military authority. He's about to go into battle. But he grows impatient because Samuel, the priest, is running late.
Right. Samuel is late. The troops are scattering. Saul is panicking.
Exactly. So Saul decides to cross the aisle. He takes on the priestly role by offering the sacrifice himself.
Just crossing that boundary.
And it literally costs him his dynasty. I mean, God strips the kingdom from him right there. The system just could not tolerate a fallen human trying to fuse the sword and the altar.
It's a structural issue. Fallen humanity simply lacks the structural integrity to hold absolute power without it being perfectly anchored in divine intimacy.
It's like trying to hook a massive 1,000-horsepower engine to a chassis with no steering wheel.
That is a great analogy.
Right. You have all this aggressive forward momentum, but absolutely no direction, no nuance, no sensitivity. You're just going to cause a catastrophic wreck.
And we see this play out sociologically even now. Engelbrecht actually maps this ancient fracture onto modern religious culture, which is fascinating.
Yeah, let's talk about that, the extremes we see today.
Right. Look at the believers who only want to function as kings. You know, the fighters, the enforcers of truth.
The ones always on the offensive.
Exactly. The text argues they often become incredibly harsh. They become legalistic, culturally militant, and eventually they just hollow out and burn out.
They have no oil in the engine.
Right. They have no inward fuel, no compassion of the Father.
But then look at the other extreme. The believers who only function as priests.
Yeah.
They sit in the sanctuary. They have these rich, beautiful internal prayer lives. They worship for hours. But when a profound injustice happens in their community, or even like there is darkness in their own family, they do nothing.
They avoid confrontation entirely.
Right. And going back to the car analogy, having a steering wheel with no engine means you just sit in the driveway.
Just sitting there.
It's passive stagnation. They refuse to pick up the sword of the king, so their deep intimacy never actually translates into real-world transformation.
Which is a tragedy, really. And it makes the prophetic shift we see later in the biblical narrative so fascinating.
Yeah, because if the Old Testament required this rigid separation of powers to keep people from destroying themselves, how do we ever get to a paradigm where you and I are commanded to be both?
Right. It takes a radical shift.
And Engelbrecht points to this incredibly bizarre, almost scandalous moment in Zechariah chapter 6.
It really is a masterclass in prophetic disruption.
Setting the scene, Zechariah is commanded to take silver and gold from the returning exiles. He's told to fashion this elaborate, multi-tiered crown and place it on a man's head.
Now, logically, politically, that crown should go to Zerubbabel.
Right, because he's the governor.
He is the civil leader, the descendant of David. It makes total sense for him to wear the crown. But God explicitly commands Zechariah to bypass the governor entirely and crown Joshua,
The high priest.
the high priest.
Which is just, that's basically treasonous, or at least massively offensive to the political order of the day. You don't crown the guy in charge of the incense. No, you don't. But it was meant to be jarring. The author points out that this was a symbolic, prophetic declaration that the era of the divided offices was coming to an end.
Wow.
God was pointing to a future figure who would permanently shatter that divide and unite the throne and the altar once and for all.
Because Zechariah tells Joshua right then, behold, the man whose name is the branch.
Yes, the branch.
And we see that title, the branch, weaving all through the prophetic text, right? Like Isaiah 11 talks about the root out of the dry stem of Jesse. Jeremiah talks about the righteous branch of David.
And we know, historically and theologically, this is pointing directly to Jesus.
Exactly, because Jesus is the only one who possesses the structural integrity to hold both offices without collapsing under the weight of it.
Because he is the spotless lamb led to the slaughter. He is the ultimate priest offering the ultimate perfect sacrifice. But he is simultaneously the Lion of Judah,
The King of Kings.
returning to enforce total dominion. He can handle absolute sovereign authority precisely because he possesses absolute unbroken intimacy with the Father. He is the engine and the steering wheel working in flawless synchronization.
That's exactly it. And there is a specific nuance Engelbrecht pulls out of that Zechariah 6 prophecy that I found absolutely compelling.
Oh, a part about sitting?
Yes. The text says, "This branch shall sit and rule on his throne, so he shall be a priest on his throne."
Right.
The author asks, why does the posture of sitting carry so much theological weight here?
And he connects it to Hebrews 10.
He does. In the earthly Levitical system, priests never sat down while on duty in the tabernacle.
Literally no chairs in the room.
None. Because their work was never finished, human sin was chronic, so the sacrifices were perpetual. They stood daily, repeatedly offering the same blood.
Just constantly working.
But Jesus, after offering one single sacrifice for all time, what did he do? He sat down at the right hand of God.
Because it was done. The seated posture is the ultimate proof that the work of the altar is finished.
The atonement is complete. The tension between the sword and the incense is finally resolved in him. The royal priest is seated because the legal requirement of the priesthood has been satisfied, and now he governs from a position of absolute rest.
Okay, that makes total sense for Jesus. I mean, he is perfect.
Oh.
He can handle the dual mandate.
Right.
But the whole premise of this book and what Engelbrecht is arguing is that we are supposed to step into this dual identity.
Yes, the modern disciple.
But we still have that human weakness that caused Saul to fail. We still have the capacity for corruption. So how on earth do we get the clearance to operate as kings and priests?
It's a great question, and Engelbrecht grounds the answer in the concept of the true vine from John 15.
Okay, the grafting imagery.
Exactly. The mechanism isn't that you or I suddenly become perfect, standalone kings or high priests on our own merit. Jesus retains the ultimate supremacy.
We aren't replacing him.
No, not at all. But when we are grafted into him, when we are hidden in Christ, the author explains that we inherit a shared anointing.
We become co-heirs.
Right. We operate as co-heirs, we are granted access to his priestly intimacy, and we are deputized to wield his kingly authority. We are operating under his legal backing.
But the author lays down a massive caveat here, and I think we really need to highlight this for the listener. To wield that kingly authority safely, you have to master the priest's intimacy first.
It's non-negotiable.
You cannot enforce the will of a king you do not intimately know.
Exactly. Which brings us to the author's sharp critique of what he terms mechanical religion.
Oh, this part was so convicting.
Yeah. He argues that if the priestly foundation is flawed, the kingly execution will be destructive. And mechanical religion is the silent killer of that priestly calling.
And it's something practically everyone who has been in a faith community for more than a few years has experienced.
No, for sure.
It's faith on autopilot. You are saying the right words, you're attending the right gatherings, you're reading the text, but the internal apparatus is completely dead.
It's the psychology of habituation applied to the divine. When you reduce relationship to a routine, your brain literally stops engaging deeply.
You just go through the motions.
Right. You start believing that if you input the right behaviors, like you do A, B, and C, then God is legally obligated to output the desired blessing.
It becomes a transaction.
Exactly. Obedience devolves into a transactional duty. Worship becomes a completely sterile routine.
It's the exact critique Jesus leveled at the Pharisees, isn't it?
100%. Absolute, rigid, outward correctness, masking total inward emptiness, performance without presence.
So how do we break out of that? Engelbrecht counters this by pointing to a vision he had in 2022.
Right. A vision centered on two words: set apart.
Set apart.
He argues that breaking mechanical religion requires a return to biblical consecration. And, we often soften that word in modern culture. We make it just about, avoiding obvious sins.
Just being a generally good person.
Right. But the text insists true consecration is aggressive. It means separating yourself from the common and the unclean, offering your entire existence as a living sacrifice.
Meaning you are relinquishing ownership of your time, your capital, your career trajectory, your family dynamics. You are handing the deed to your life over to the king.
Yes. And that deep, unreserved surrender is the prerequisite for actual worship.
Let's talk about worship, because Engelbrecht redefines it here by diving into the Hebrew word shata.
Shata, yeah.
Because it goes far beyond the modern conception of, just singing songs for 20 minutes before a sermon on a Sunday morning.
It's way deeper than that. Shaka literally means to bow down, to prostrate oneself, to crouch or fall flat.
Face in the dirt.
Yes. Historically, it's the posture of a subject kissing the dirt before a sovereign. It implies an absolute reverent, physical, and spiritual submission.
Okay, let me jump in here because I can hear the objection forming for a lot of people listening to this.
Sure.
The author is pushing for this intense face in the dirt reverence. But didn't the new covenant change that dynamic?
How do you mean?
Well, Matthew 27 says that the moment Jesus died, the massive veil in the temple, the one separating humanity from the Holy of Holies, it ripped from top to bottom.
Right, the barrier was destroyed.
The barrier is gone. And then Hebrews tells us to approach the throne of grace boldly. So hasn't the era of trembling on the floor been replaced by a much more casual, intimate friendship with God?
It's a really vital tension to navigate, and Engelbrecht doesn't shy away from it in the text. He acknowledges that the torn veil absolutely ended the era of exclusive, mediated access.
Meaning you don't need a priest to go in for you.
Exactly. You don't need a Levitical priest anymore. You can step directly into the throne room yourself. But Engelbrecht makes a crucial philosophical distinction here. Unhindered access does not eliminate the requirement of reverence.
Wow. Boldness isn't the same as flippancy.
Precisely. We approach boldly because the blood of Jesus gives us the legal right to be there, not because the God on the throne has suddenly become less holy.
Right.
We are still approaching the creator of the cosmos. The author stresses that we shouldn't confuse profound intimacy with casual familiarity. You can have deep, secure love for a king, but you don't treat him like a buddy. You just high-five in the hallway.
Yeah, you don't stroll in casually. And the author points to David as the ultimate template for this kind of intimacy, right?
He does, because David is known as the man after God's own heart. He had a level of intimacy that genuinely baffled the people around him.
But it wasn't a casual intimacy.
No, not at all. Just read Psalm 63. "O God, you are my God. Earnestly I seek you. My soul thirsts for you. My flesh faints for you, as in a dry and weary land where there is no water."
That is intense.
It is. That isn't casual. That is a desperate, consuming, awestruck reverence.
And that reverence, that posture, is the fuel of the priest. And Engelbrecht's point is that only when you have established that, only when your heart is aligned with the Father and the Holy of Holies, can you safely stand up, turn around, and face the chaos of the world.
Which is the pivot to the kingly dimension.
Right. Here's where the mechanics get incredibly practical for the listener. How does a disciple who has just been weeping in intimacy suddenly wield authority in a hostile world?
It requires a massive mindset shift. Engelbrecht totally reframes our modern understanding of spiritual warfare here, and he starts with our spatial orientation.
Our orientation.
Yeah, he leans heavily on Ephesians 2.6, which is the concept that believers are seated with him in heavenly places.
There's that word again, seated.
Notice the return of it, yes. Just as the branch is seated in rest because the work is finished, the text argues that you, the disciple, are spiritually seated with him.
This fundamentally alters the trajectory of spiritual warfare.
It really does. Because you are not on the ground, overwhelmed, fighting for a victory, looking up and begging heaven to intervene.
You are enforcing a victory from above.
Yes. Rest and authority are inextricably linked in this paradigm. You don't operate from a place of panicked striving. You operate from a place of seated governance.
Which completely kills the Hollywood version of spiritual warfare.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, so much of the modern church pictures spiritual warfare as this highly emotional, paranoid state, looking for a demon behind every minor inconvenience.
Sweating, shouting, exhausting yourself.
Exactly. But the text argues that true warfare isn't an emotional struggle at all. It's an administrative function.
It's purely administrative. Look at Colossians 2.15. It states that Jesus already disarmed the principalities and powers, making a public spectacle of them on the cross.
The decisive cosmic battle is over.
Over. The enemy's legal claim has been voided. Therefore, according to the source material, the disciples' job isn't to try and defeat a powerful enemy. Their job is to legally enforce the defeat of a disarmed enemy.
It's about jurisdiction. Let me use an analogy here. Think of a traffic cop standing in an intersection. A 2-ton truck is barreling toward them. Now, the cop doesn't brace themselves to physically wrestle the truck to a halt.
That would be insane.
Right. The cop just holds up a hand, and the truck stops. Why? Not because the cop has the physical power to stop it, but because the driver knows the cop's hand gesture is backed by the massive, overwhelming authority of the entire state government.
I love that.
The cop is just administering the authority of the state.
That analogy perfectly captures Engelbrecht's premise. But, the flip side of that analogy is equally true, and it's a stark warning.
What's the flip side?
If you are just some random person in street clothes, totally unaligned with the government, and you step into traffic and hold up your hand,
you are going to get destroyed.
You're going to get run over. If you aren't aligned with God, if you haven't done the priestly work of submission, Your kingly hand gestures mean absolutely nothing to the darkness.
Which is exactly why the author lays out 3 sequential levels of warfare. The order of these levels is the difference between true authority and getting run over by the truck.
Yes. Let's walk through those. Level 1 is perception.
Perception.
Perception is pure spiritual discernment. It is the ability to read the atmosphere before you react. And this relies heavily on your priestly intimacy.
So you're not just rushing in blind.
Right. Before you start commanding things, you are listening to the Holy Spirit. You're asking, are you sensing an atmospheric shift? Is this just a difficult human interaction, or is there an underlying spiritual pressure causing this chaos?
Engelbrecht argues that most warfare is actually won or lost, right here.
Right.
In the quiet ability to perceive reality accurately.
Absolutely.
It's taking the spiritual temperature of the room before you start shouting at the thermostat.
That's a great way to put it. Now, once you have that perception, you move to level 2, authority.
The kingly execution.
Exactly. Authority is where you speak the truth, reject the lies, and verbally command alignment with God's will. You are enforcing the order you just perceived in level 1.
So you're taking dominion over the atmosphere of your home, your office, your mind. You're saying, this spirit of confusion has no legal right here. Peace will be established.
Right. You are speaking it out. And then level 3 is intercession.
How does that fit in?
Intercession is standing in sustained agreement with heaven. It's not trying to convince God to do something he doesn't want to do. It's aligning your will with his and releasing what he is already doing into the earthly situation.
And this sequence, perception, authority, intercession, it mirrors James 4.7 perfectly.
Submit to God, resist the devil, and he will flee.
Yes. Submission is the perception and intercession. Resistance is the authority. If you try to resist the devil without first submitting to God, you have zero legal backing.
And Engelbrecht points out how disastrous false authority is when you try to skip the submission part.
Oh, he uses the story of the sons of Sceva, right?
Yes, in the book of Acts.
Yeah.
These itinerant exorcists try to cast out a demon by saying, in the name of Jesus whom Paul preaches, I command you to come out.
When Paul preaches, they don't even know him.
Right, it's secondhand authority.
They are trying to use his name as a magic spell without having any actual priestly intimacy themselves.
Exactly, and the demonic entity recognizes the lack of jurisdiction immediately.
Wait, it says something like, Jesus I know?
Yes. The demon actually talks back and says, Jesus I know, and Paul I know about, but who are you?
Oh, wow. So chilling.
And then the man possessed by the spirit literally beats them naked and bleeding. They run for their lives.
Because false authority is instantly exposed when it confronts real darkness.
Always. The author also brings up the Babylonian king Belshazzar as another example.
Remind me of that one.
Belshazzar throws this massive feast, and he arrogantly drinks wine out of the sacred gold goblets that his father stole from the Jewish temple.
Oh, right. Using the holy vessels for a party.
Yes, he is parading a false worldly authority, profaning the holy vessels, and God's response is immediate. The fingers of a human hand appear out of nowhere and write on the wall. Mene, mene, tekel. You have been weighed in the balances and found wanting.
And he was dead by morning.
Dead by morning. In the kingdom, legitimacy isn't assumed. It is derived entirely from remaining grafted in the vine.
Okay, so we have the theory down. We understand the priest bowing in the Holy of Holies and the king standing up to enforce the peace.
Right.
But on a Tuesday afternoon, when the email server's down, the kids are screaming, and your anxiety is spiking, how do you actually live this out? Switching hats all day sounds exhausting.
It would be exhausting if you viewed them as separate, disconnected tasks. But Engelbrecht uses the book of Nehemiah to illustrate how this is actually a unified posture.
Nehemiah provides the historical template for the modern disciple.
He really does. Think about Nehemiah's situation. He is tasked with rebuilding the decimated walls of Jerusalem. But the surrounding nations are actively plotting to attack the workers and stop the construction.
So you have a massive, complex building project under constant military threat.
Exactly. So look at the solution in Nehemiah 4.17. The workers carrying materials did their work with one hand and held a weapon in the other.
A trowel in one hand, a sword in the other.
Building and battling simultaneously. You don't stop one to do the other.
And Nehemiah himself models the dual identity perfectly. As a civil leader, the king's side, he is organizing the supply chains, strategizing the defenses, positioning the guards, governing the city.
Yes.
But as a man of faith, the priest's side, He is fasting, weeping over the state of the city, and interceding constantly before God.
There is a line from the text here that really deserves to be highlighted. Engelbrecht writes, "You cannot build what God has called you to build without confronting what is trying to stop it."
That is profound. I mean, think about the implications of that for your own life.
Yeah.
If you are entirely focused on building, if you're just trying to be positive, loving everyone, creating a great culture at work or at home, but you refuse to confront the toxic behaviors, the deception, or the spiritual darkness trying to infiltrate your project.
Your wall is going to be torn down faster than you can build it.
Exactly. But the reverse is also true. If you only fight, if you stand on top of a pile of rubble, swinging a sword and shouting at the enemy all day, but you never actually pick up a brick to rebuild the city.
You are just aggressively defending a pile of rocks.
Right. You aren't restoring anything. The posture of the kingdom disciple requires both. You are restoring the brokenness while actively resisting the opposition.
And Engelbrecht breaks this down into a highly practical daily rhythm for the disciple.
Okay, let's get into the practicals. How do you flow between these states from morning to night?
He suggests anchoring the start of your day in the priestly dimension.
Makes sense.
Before the influx of emails, before the demands of the day pull you outward, you go inward. You start with surrender. You seek the presence of God, listen to the Spirit, and ask to be filled. You establish your alignment.
You make sure the steering wheel is connected before you turn on the engine.
Exactly. Then, as you step into the daytime, navigating your career, your family, your community, you step into the kingly dimension.
Operating outwardly.
Right. You speak the truth in meetings. You make ethical decisions that align with kingdom values. You take dominion over the atmosphere of fear or gossip trying to take root in your office. You enforce the peace.
And as the day concludes,
you transition back to the priest. You don't end the day reviewing your performance metrics or stressing over your to-do list. You end the day in intimacy. You reflect on where you succeeded and where you failed. You repent if you misstepped. You release the burdens of the day back to the Father, and you rest.
It's a constant, fluid movement between listening and acting. The text actually argues that this specific flow is the definition of spiritual maturity.
Yes. It's not just doing a bunch of good things for God, it's moving dynamically with Him.
It should feel as natural as breathing, inhaling the presence and nature of God as a priest, and exhaling the authority and will of God as a king.
That's a beautiful way to summarize it.
Up to this point, we've been looking almost exclusively at the individual disciple, but Engelbrecht zooms out significantly in the final sections of the book.
He does. He moves to the corporate level.
Right. What happens when you get a collective community of these king priests operating together? What is the institutional mission of a church full of these dual-wielding believers?
Well, according to the text, they form a collective entity that operates simultaneously as a forward-operating military base and an emergency trauma hospital.
A hospital and a military base.
Engelbrecht shares a vision from 2019 where he saw the church functioning precisely this way. And he ties it to the prophecy in Amos 9:11, which is the promise to restore David's fallen tent.
Let's talk about David's tent because it was very unique.
Very.
Unlike the massive, rigid, highly structured system of the later temple, David's tent was this intimate, accessible place where the Ark of the Covenant was housed and worship happened 24/7. It represented unhindered intimacy and God's manifest authority.
And restoring that tent means restoring a community that houses the presence of God and extends His authority into the brokenness of the world. Engelbrecht actually compares the ideal function of the church to Doctors Without Borders.
I really love that analogy because Doctors Without Borders, they don't sit in pristine, comfortable clinics waiting for healthy people to show up.
No, they go to where the bleeding is.
Right. They cross geopolitical borders, they go into active war zones, they navigate cultural hostility, all to treat the physical casualties of human conflict.
And the church is mandated to do the exact same thing spiritually. To cross cultural, denominational, and societal borders to treat the spiritual casualties of the cosmic conflict.
They are supposed to go to the darkest, most dangerous, overlooked places, because that is precisely where the wounded are bleeding out.
But the healing the church is supposed to offer isn't just a generic, feel better message. The text breaks down the human condition into 3 distinct categories of sickness: the spirit, the soul, and the body.
And Engelbrecht insists that the church must be equipped to handle all 3 because treating one while ignoring the others is essentially malpractice.
Let's break those down. First, sickness of the spirit. This is fundamental spiritual impoverishment. It is the state of being entirely disconnected from the Creator.
Unsaved.
Right. And the treatment for spiritual sickness is the gospel of salvation, bringing a person into a redemptive, living relationship with Jesus. That resurrects the dead spirit.
But then you have the soul. And the soul encompasses your mind, your will, and your emotions.
And this is where it gets complicated, because even after the spirit is saved, the soul can remain profoundly sick.
Meaning believers can still be sick in their souls.
Oh, absolutely. This looks like clinical depression, deep psychological trauma, crippling anxiety, bitterness, or severe unforgiveness.
And modern religious culture often struggles with this so much. I mean, we either try to spiritualize it away by telling people to just pray harder.
Just have more faith.
Right, which is so damaging. Or we swing the other way and outsource it entirely to secular psychology and wash our hands of it.
But Engelbrecht argues that healing the soul requires intense, long-term discipleship from the church community. It requires walking with someone through the trenches of their trauma, helping them renew their mind with truth, and counseling them through the grueling process of forgiving the unforgivable.
It takes time.
A lot of time. And finally, the third category, the body. Physical affliction, disease, chronic pain.
Because Jesus didn't just preach to the spirit, he constantly healed the sick body, and he restored the tormented mind.
The mandate for the modern disciple is Trinitarian healing. We are called to lead people to salvation, to disciple their minds through trauma, and to lay hands on them believing for physical restoration.
Which brings us to the most intense and probably the most misunderstood concept in the text, the spiritual SWAT team.
Oh boy, yes, the SWAT team.
I mean, whenever you say deliverance ministry or spiritual SWAT team, people instantly picture a Hollywood horror movie.
Spinning heads, levitating beds.
Right, screaming, total chaos and fear.
But Engelbrecht reclaims this concept completely in the book, stripping away all the sensationalism.
He really grounds it. He defines this SWAT team as a mature, highly accountable group of believers who are specifically equipped to handle intense cases of spiritual warfare and demonic oppression.
Not lone wolves. No, highly accountable. They don't operate out of ego or a desire for spectacle. They operate under strict biblical authority, profound discernment, and above all, deep compassion.
That's the core of it, the compassion. Deliverance isn't an extreme sport for super Christians.
No, it's a normative part of the kingdom.
Jesus gave the keys to the kingdom to his followers in Matthew 16. He gave them the authority to bind and loose. He fully expected the average disciple to encounter darkness and evict it.
But Engelbrecht is a massive warning here that we need to emphasize. Whenever deliverance gets weird, scary, or chaotic, it is almost always because the focus has shifted off of Jesus and onto the demonic entity.
We elevate the power of the enemy.
Exactly. We make it about a power struggle. But deliverance is not about the demon. It is entirely about Jesus, and it is about the captive person being gloriously liberated.
Right.
When a disciple is operating in true kingly authority, which, as we've established over and over, flows directly from deep priestly intimacy, there is absolutely no need for screaming matches with the darkness.
There is no need for panic.
It is simply an administrative eviction. You are enforcing the finished work of the cross.
It's like standing in that room and saying, "You are trespassing on property that was purchased by the blood of Jesus Christ. You have no legal right here. Leave."
And because the authority is legitimate, they must leave. The goal is never the spectacle of the exorcism. The goal is the restoration of the human being so they can glorify the king.
So as we pull all these threads together for you, the listener, the entire premise of this text is that you are called to be an active representative of heaven's government.
You are an ambassador.
Yes, an ambassador. Your citizenship resides in heaven, but your deployment is right here in the messiness of earth. And to survive and succeed in that deployment, you have to embrace the paradox.
You really do.
You have to learn to war like a king and intercede like a priest. You have to heal like a trauma surgeon and build like Nehemiah with a trowel in one hand and a sword in the other.
And honestly, it demands a really brutally honest evaluation of your own life. Because all of us have a natural default setting.
We all lean one way or the other.
We do. So you have to ask yourself, are you using the sanctuary as a hiding place? Are you using your private prayer life as a pious excuse to avoid the messy, confrontational, exhausting work of actually advancing the kingdom in your workplace or your family?
That is a tough question. But then look at the other side. Are you out there swinging a sword every single day?
Right.
Are you constantly arguing on social media, fighting cultural battles, trying to aggressively enforce morality on the people around you? But you haven't actually knelt in the quiet of the Holy of Holies in months.
Are you running that massive destructive engine without a steering wheel?
Exactly. You cannot fulfill your calling without carrying both the sword and the incense. One hand builds, the other hand fights.
The intimacy of the priest is what gives your kingly authority its actual power.
And the authority of the king is what gives your priestly intimacy its tangible impact on the world.
Which brings us right back to that broken box we talked about at the beginning.
That clean, single, easily defined lane you thought you were supposed to stay in. God is actively inviting you out of that box and into the paradox.
He is.
He is inviting you to hold the ultimate unyielding authority to command darkness to leave, perfectly backed by the ultimate weeping intimacy of the creator of the universe.
It completely redefines how you interact with reality.
So I want to leave you with a final thought to chew on as you step back into your day. If you truly possess this dual calling, if you genuinely hold the king's authority backed by the priest's access, how does that change the way you look at the greatest obstacle sitting in front of you right now?
Think about that impossible situation in your life.
Yeah, that hostile work environment, that deeply fractured relationship, that financial ruin, that chronic anxiety. What if that obstacle isn't actually a wall designed to stop you?
What if it's the assignment?
Exactly. What if it is the exact territory you were assigned to conquer and heal?
You have the tools required for the terrain.
You have the sword, and you have the incense. Time to use them.